I have always been curious about the unknown. I'm drawn to things that are unexplainable. I want to explore all that this world has to offer. That's what led me to astral projection. Your body stays in the physical world, while your spirit wanders in the astral realm. I have never successfully astral projected from my body yet, but that's going to change tonight. It's taken me a full year of trial and error, but I think I finally unlocked the ability to walk through the spirit realm. My obsession had led me to countless books and online forums, each promising a gateway to the ethereal plane. I truly believe that astral projection held the key to unlocking hidden dimensions beyond this reality. In the dimly lit room of my old Victorian house, I lay floating in a metal tub I found at a local hardware store, lined with salt and ocean rocks at the bottom. The room's lights were turned off and the tub is surrounded by an assortment of candles and incense. The air is heavy with the scent of sage, and the flickering flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. I began the ritual by clearing my mind and immersing myself in a deep state of meditation. I focused on my breath, allowing the rhythm to guide me into a trance-like state. As minutes turned into hours, an otherworldly calm settled over me. I felt a gentle detachment from my physical form, a feeling of weightlessness. I could no longer feel the swaying of warm water. Instead, I felt cold air all around me. I stood up and walked out of the tub. I looked down and could see my body calmly floating in the water. I couldn't believe it. I was astral projecting. Joy and pride swept through me. Looking around the room, I noticed things were a little different. Everything was the same in my room, but the colors seemed darker. There were more shadows. The lights had a dark blue hue to them, and there was a black mist hovering just above the floor. My feet disappeared in them. The atmosphere left me with an eerie feeling. The astral realm is not what I thought it would look like. It's very depressing. I picked up a candle off the floor to use for light, and I left my room to go explore. There were no sounds around me. No birds chirping, no wind blowing, no creaking of the old house. Just silence. As I made my way down the steps, I saw something move in the corner of the living room. It couldn't be the mist. It hovers too slowly on the ground. I reached the entrance to the living room, scanning the environment. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed through the whole house, but no one answered back. I grew anxious. Someone is definitely here with me, but they're hiding. Suddenly, I heard the creaking of a door. Turning my head to the right, I saw the basement door slowly open. My heart began to beat faster. Why does this feel wrong? I reluctantly walked over to the door and looked down into the basement. The stairs vanished into a pool of black mist. My entire body was screaming at me to shut the door, but I wanted to know more about this world. I descended down the stairs, through the eerie mist, and into the dark abyss that is my basement. The air was heavier down here, as if it were being forced out of my lungs with every breath. I held up the candle in front of me to get a better look of the layout. The basement looked the same. It even had the same box of tools I left in front of the stairs. But suddenly, I froze. I saw a man at the back of the room. "You shouldn't be here, wanderer," the man said in a raspy, low voice. I moved closer to the man, trying to get a better look of him. "I've never seen a spirit before. Can you come closer?" "It's hard to see you," I said warily. "You smell so nice, I hope no one else smells you," the man said. I didn't know how to interpret what he just said. He moved closer to the flame of the candle and my heart dropped into my stomach. The man's face was not entirely a man. Its face was completely distorted. Eyes that were pure black, sharp jagged teeth, and skin that was sunken around the bones in his face. He gripped my arm and dug his dirty clawed hands into my skin. Pain shot through my arm and I screamed. I tried to pull my arm away, but he tightened his grip. He smiled, licked his lips and said, "You smell like life, and you're all mine." A wave of fear crashed over me, and I began thrashing my body. As I was panicking, the candle I held collided with the spirit's face, and it screeched in pain, letting me go. I sprinted to the stairs of the basement and frantically made my way to the door. Out of the dark mist, the spirit's grotesque hand wrapped around my ankle, yanking me down the steps. The spirit was too strong to fight against. It was almost hopeless to fight, because I couldn't win. Suddenly, a bright yellow light stood at the top of the stairs. So bright I had to cover my eyes. The dark spirit let me go and ran for cover in the darkness. I turned my attention to the bright light and noticed that there was a person in the middle of it. I couldn't see its features, but I could tell it was more human-like compared to the evil creature next to me. I immediately felt a sense of ease with this being, that everything was going to be all right. The bright human walked down to me and said, "Go, now." I wasted no time and reached the first floor of the house. I turned around to glance at my savior one last time, but the basement door instantly shut, and I saw a blast of yellow light slipping out through the cracks. I ran upstairs and made it to my body that was still floating in the water. I touched my arm and felt my spirit merge with my physical body. I gasped loudly and found myself holding the tub with both hands. The room around me was vibrant in color. No more mist and no more darkness. I was back in my world again. I was so happy to hear the sounds of cars outside and the chirping of birds. But sadness finally sunk in when I thought about the experience I just went through. I almost didn't make it back. If it wasn't for that person who saved me, I don't know what would have happened. I was so thankful for them. This experience has taught me that there are things that may never be answered or explored, that some secrets were meant to be left alone. I have always been able to astral project all of my life, but my dad and I prefer to call it astral travel. I was 8 years old when I did it for the first time. My dad was there to help guide me in the beginning. He said astral travel was common for our family, that we had a gift that allowed our spirits to leave our bodies and travel freely through the astral plane. But not everyone was lucky enough to experience it, like my sister and cousins. It was weird at first, the sensation of floating, but it got easier over time. My father warned me, though, that this gift came with its own set of dangers. He said the astral plane isn't just empty space, that there are things out there that aren't friendly. I didn't fully grasp the weight of his words until the night I encountered one of those things. I ventured beyond the walls of our house, floating into the backyard. That's when I saw them, dark, shadowy figures lurking at the edge of the yard, just beyond the reach of the porch light. Their eyes glowed red, and their bodies had an inhuman look to them. Thankfully, my dad came rushing out of the house to save me. He was holding 2 large flares in his hand, which made the demonic entities shrink away from us. I had never been terrified like that before. After that, I never stepped foot outside my house when I astral traveled. That lesson stayed with me, even as an adult. I now have a family of my own, but my wife and children are unaware of my nightly activities, though I watch over them as they sleep, making sure they are safe. My son told me about his lucid dreaming recently, so it's only a matter of time before he joins me in the astral realm. I was hoping that he would wake up in this plane tonight, but it was already 4 in the morning, which is usually too late to travel. I was in the living room in front of my lit fireplace, reading a book and floating off the couch, trying to kill time before I woke up when suddenly I heard a thumping noise from upstairs. That was weird to me because this place is dead quiet every night. I set my book down and I drifted from room to room, checking on my wife first, then moving on to my children. As I entered my son's room, a noise caught my attention, a soft, unsettling whispering. I looked up and felt a chill of terror run through me. There was a horrifying demon on the ceiling above my son. It had found its way into my home. It was grotesque-looking and animal-like. The demon spirit had hind legs, sharp claws that plunged into the ceiling, and slippery skin, almost like it was covered in oil. Its head snapped in my direction, and I gasped at its hollow red eyes. "Get away from him," I shouted at the demon. I knew I had to act quickly. I grabbed a baseball sitting on a dresser next to me and threw it at the demon, but he hid it away with its large clawed hand. The demon detached itself from the ceiling and began to pursue me through the house. It moved with an unsettling grace, its limbs elongating and contracting as it slithered after me. I led it through the hallway and into the kitchen. I knew that light could drive it away, and there was a lamp on top of the counter that was on. I ran behind it, using it as a shield between me and the demon. The evil spirit stopped in its tracks, deterred by the light. The lamp bought me some time as I sifted through drawers in the kitchen. My heart was racing and I was trying not to panic. I opened a drawer at the bottom of the sink and saw a flare I had always kept there. Before I could ignite the flare, the demon roared so loud that I had to cover my ears. The awful sound seemed to vibrate through my very soul. The lamplight flickered slightly and then shattered into pieces, plunging the room into darkness. Fear surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Then I remembered the fireplace in the living room. The fire was still burning there, and I knew it was my best chance. The demon leaped across the counter, crashing into the dishes next to me. I fell to the ground and screamed. I instantly felt a burning sensation in my right arm. It had slashed into my arm with its claws. I somehow got off the ground and sprinted toward the living room, the demon close on my heels. The fire lit up the entire living room, keeping the demon at bay in the kitchen. I stood in front of the fire, feeling a sense of relief. I could see the demon's glowing red eyes in the kitchen, feeling its stare burning into me. It began destroying things in the kitchen, trying to scare me, but I was too focused on my shredded arm. I tore off a piece of my shirt and wrapped it around my biceps, hoping it would be good enough to stop the bleeding. I pulled out the flare from my pocket and set it ablaze. I walked toward the demon in the kitchen. The glow of the red flare pushed the evil spirit back. It was growling at me, but I shoved it close to its face, and its oily skin began bubbling in the light. The demon made a piercing shriek and crashed into the table behind it. "Get out of my house!" I shouted, my voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. The demon roared again, but it retreated to the front door of the house. With one last menacing glare, it turned and fled, disappearing into the misty darkness outside. I stood there trembling, the flare still burning in my hand. I stood in front of my door for the rest of the night, making sure the demon wouldn't come back to hurt my family. I had never seen one come into the house before. It must have sensed that my son was awakening into the astral realm. When I finally returned to my body, I knew I had to take action to protect my family. The next day, I installed lights all around the outside of the house, ensuring that no corner was left in shadow. Inside, I placed lamps in every room and stocked up on flares, candles, and lighters. I wasn't going to let another demon spirit come near my family. From that night on, our home was bathed in light, both inside and out. My father's warning had been clear: the astral plane was dangerous, and I needed to be prepared to defend my family from the threats that lurked there. The memory of that demon's eyes would never leave me, but I took comfort in knowing that I had faced it down and driven it away. My family was safe, and I would do everything in my power to keep it that way. "6 months ago, my father suddenly passed away in a car accident. My dad was my rock, my guide, and my biggest supporter. Losing him left a gaping void in my heart. The worst part was that I never got to say goodbye to him. In the weeks following his death, I tried everything to connect with him, to hear his voice just one more time. I visited mediums, desperate for any sign of his presence. I tried using a Ouija board, but I just sat at my table for hours, never getting a response from anyone. I even resorted to ghost hunting in our house, hoping to catch a glimpse of his spirit. But nothing worked. He was gone, and the pain was unbearable. I was glad to have my friend Vince comfort me during this hard time. He saw me try everything possible to connect with my dad, so that's when he brought up astral projection. He said, it's a way to separate your spirit from your body, and that you can travel to different places, even see spirits in that world. So we decided to try that. We couldn't astral travel the first time we tried. It was going to take a while to figure it out. The next few months were filled with intense practice. Vince and I tried various techniques, from meditation to visualizations, and even listening to music designed to induce an out-of-body experience. At first it was frustrating. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't separate my spirit from my body. Finally, one night it happened. I was lying on my bed, focusing on my breathing, when I felt a strange sensation, like I was floating. I opened my eyes and saw my body lying on the bed beneath me. I had done it. I was astral projecting. Vince was already waiting for me in the living room. We both looked at each other, a mix of excitement and fear in our eyes. "We did it," he whispered. I looked around and noticed the house looked different in the astral plane. Everything had a soft, glowing aura, and there was a sense of tranquility that was almost eerie. Vince went off to look at something in the kitchen, and I was about to follow him, when all of a sudden, I heard whispering behind me. I turned around, hoping it was my dad, but there was no one there. The whispering sounded like it was near the front door now, as if it were leading me outside. Everything inside of me screamed to turn around, but finding my dad was the most important thing to me. I would do anything to see him again. I opened the front door and took a step outside, seeing my feet disappear into the gray mist. Vince grabbed my hand. "Don't separate from me," he warned. "It can be dangerous. The spirits here, they can hurt you. And if you're injured in this world, it crosses over to the real world." I nodded in agreement, but I was eager to leave the house. "Let's explore a little. I want to see what's out there." We walked out to the dark, misty street, and you could feel that there was an unsettling energy all around us. Everything seemed a little lifeless. There were no signs of animals. The trees didn't have any leaves on them, and there was no color to anything. It made me anxious. Suddenly, I saw a figure of a man running away in the distance. "Dad?" I called out, my voice echoing through the street. Vince quickly turned to me and said, "I don't think that's your dad." But I ignored him. "Dad!" I shouted again, breaking free from Vince's grip. "Wait!" Vince called after me, but I was already running towards the figure. The mist seemed to close in around me, and the whispering came back, but this time, I could hear many people whispering all at once. Then, shadow figures emerged out of the mist. My eyes widened in fear. Their faces were distorted and their bodies were unnaturally long. I was surrounded by a group of evil spirits, and there was nowhere to go. I felt hands grabbing me, pushing me to the ground. "No!" I screamed. "Let me go!" But my voice was drowned out by the insidious whispering coming from the shadow creatures dragging me down. The whispers turned into mocking laughter, and I felt a wave of panic wash over me. Suddenly, I heard a voice in the distance. "Get away from her!" the voice shouted. I thought it was my dad coming to save me, but it was Vince. He appeared out of the mist, holding a bright flashlight. He pointed it at the spirits, and they hissed in anger and pain, recoiling from the light. "Get away from her!" Vince shouted again. The spirits released me and I stumbled towards my friend. He wrapped his arm around me, guiding me away from the spirits. "I told you not to leave me," he said, his voice shaking with fear and relief. "I'm sorry. I thought I saw him," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We need to go now," Vince said. We made our way back to the house, and the whispers had stopped. I felt a sense of dread lifting, replaced by a desperate need to be safe in my own body again. We lay down on our beds, and with a final deep breath, I felt myself being pulled back into my physical form. I woke up to my heart racing and my body covered in sweat. Vince was already awake, sitting on the edge of my bed. I looked down at my arms and saw bruises forming in the shape of handprints. I don't know what would have happened to me if my friend wasn't there. I had been so desperate for closure to see my dad one more time that I had put myself in harm's way. I miss my dad, but I'm better off not exploring the astral realm